Firewood provides a lot of our heating and cooking needs because it's environmentally friendly, it's sustainable, it's renewable, and it's free. Today, we're going to show you the process from tree to finished firewood. Hello, welcome to English Country Life. Welcome to the woodyard and welcome to firewood processing. My name's Hugh and today I want to cover an overview of how we here at English Country Life process our fuel for cooking and heating. And it's going to start with a tree and it's going to end up with all the products that we make from that tree. And we don't waste anything here on the smallholder, and we can't afford to, and it's not environmentally friendly to do so. So every part of that tree is going to get used. Now, it's not going to be a detailed video. If you want details on how to fell a tree, how to sharpen a chainsaw, how to split wood, ask me in the comments and I'll do a detailed video topic by topic. But I wanted to start with a beginning to end video to set the whole thing in context. So let's get going. Before we start, a quick word on safety gear. I don't like to harp on about it, but I think when you're dealing with firewood, honestly, if you're dropping trees, if you're using chainsaws, you've got to think about safety. So I'm going to talk about what I do and what I consider as a minimum. You get some training, get some information, you make your own decisions, but I just want to talk about me. So what do I wear when running a saw or when splitting wood or what have you? As a minimum, I wear chainsaw trousers, and you can see on my feet chainsaw boots. They're steel toe cap, but they also have a measure of protection built into the front. I will also wear at all times when I'm running a saw a helmet with ear defenders, and a good quality one, because stuff can drop from above, something can leap up at you, hit you in the face, and honestly you need the ear defenders because saws are loud. So I'll take it off for now, but always those three items. Some people will tell you not to worry so much about chainsaw boots, but for me, if you're cutting up, if you're doing groundwork, the saw direction is going to be downwards all the time. Now you should always, if you can, try and cut well away from your body, but if you use a saw, there's going to be an opportunity for it to go through something and come down, hit your leg or your foot. So legs and feet always for groundwork, helmet at all times with a chainsaw. Sometimes you will see me wearing a chainsaw jacket, not always. If I'm working at the ground, I don't consider it to be absolutely necessary, but I own one, and if I'm working up above with a standard chainsaw, there is the opportunity of that saw coming back, hitting me in the shoulders or the chest, so I wear a chainsaw jacket. For that, sometimes, I'm going to be honest, I wear it just because it's warm and I don't mind it getting mucky. If I'm using a pole saw, a long chainsaw on a stick, then there is no opportunity of that saw coming back and hitting me, so I'm less concerned with a pole saw about using a jacket. Now, one other thing that's a bit more contentious, gloves. Generally, if logging, I wear split hide, heavy leather gloves, partly because you'll see in this video there's a good opportunity to rip your hands to bits. I found some barbed wire stuck inside a tree on this video, but also, you know, you can get jagged edges of logs, you can get splinters, etc. There are specialist chainsaw gloves. I know a lot of professional arborists who say, no, don't use them, they're not necessary. So gloves, I think, is up to you, but I think some sort of hand protection is sensible. Now, if I'm using a splitter, if it's a mechanical splitter, like a hydraulic one, I'll always wear head protection because those logs can spring off under great tension at all sorts of angles, and I'll always have some sort of foot protection on. And I'll always wear that foot protection again if I'm going to be using axes and mauls, because the opportunity to come through your workpiece, impact your foot, is quite high. So that's what I do. I've told you, you make your own decisions, but do get some training and do invest in safety gear if you can. Please excuse the wind. It's been horrendously windy right throughout this project, so I will try and make the very best of it with the sound I can, but you're going to hear some wind noise in the background. The tree that we're going to fell for today's video was immediately behind me. It was a big ash tree, and it wasn't without its problems. It was diseased, and I'll show you some evidence of that disease in a minute. It was thickly covered in ivy. It had been topped before, so it's got a big wide trunk and sort of lots of thinner branches on the top. It's also surrounded by potential hazards. There's a gas tank there. There are wires on this telegraph pole. There is a road immediately behind that hedge line, and our driveway is over there. So we have to inspect the tree, understand it, make sure that it's relatively solid, check that it is safe to fall it, and if it isn't, I'm not too proud to get a professional in to do it, to climb it, to take it down in pieces. But I want to fall it, if I can, over to the driveway in a safe and controlled manner. So let's have a look at how we do that. As promised, here's just some of the examples that this tree had disease issues. First thing I want to show you is this dark fungus. It's called a cramp ball, and it's an indication of an ash tree with real health problems. You can also see what's called spalting inside the grain. That's another kind of fungal infection. The cramp balls are actually quite an interesting thing. Let's just remove this one and show you what they look like on the inside. You can see those concentric rings. Cramp balls really feel very, very dry to the touch, but they can be dried further. Just sort of leave them on a radiator for a day or two, and then they'll take a spark and glow like a barbecue coal. And they're often used in primitive firelighting as a way of getting a spark to glow for a long time and set fire to some tinder. Having established the tree's disease, the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of all of these spindly branches using an electric pole saw. I'm going to do that for two reasons. The first one is, if it does go the wrong way, if I've removed all those spindly branches, it isn't going to touch those wires you can see off to the right. And removing things that are sort of coming out to the side also means I'm far less likely to have the tree pulled off balance as it's in the act of falling. Something else I'm choosing to do is use a small electric saw to remove any side limbs for really the same reasons. You'll see in a moment that this tree is really, really close to the fence line. What I don't want is one of those side limbs catching a fence post, spinning the tree out of control as it begins to fall. And it really is quite a risk in a confined space. You can see here the fence to the right, the trunk to the left really gives me an issue. It also revealed another problem that we're going to have to deal with in the falling of this tree. The problem that I noticed when I was removing those side limbs is that ridge you can see right the way around the trunk, about in the middle of the screen. And if we look closely at that, what we can see is a piece of barbed wire emerging. And at some point many years ago, somebody's used the tree to anchor a barbed wire strand that goes into that fence. And if I hit that with the chainsaw, then it's going to cause all kinds of damage. At best, bent teeth on the chain, and at worst, considerable issues. And after I split up the log that contains that, you can see how deeply embedded that barbed wire is within the grain of the wood. And all that dark material around the wire is where sort of rust and other material has actually sort of infected the tree, causing yet more problems. Before I get too self-congratulatory, one of the side limbs that I removed did contain another wire that I didn't spot. I did bend a tooth over on my electric chainsaw when I encountered that wire on the other side of this limb. Because of that wire, I made the decision that I'm going to actually drop the tree at about waist height. The problem I've got there is, look at this ivy. Look how thick this stuff is. I mean, it's bigger than I can get my hand around. And I can't see what's going on with the trunk under there, and we know the tree's diseased. So what I'm going to have to do is remove that ivy first to get to the solid ash wood underneath. Normally, I would use a billhook or an axe, but on this occasion, I'm just going to cut around the trunk twice with a chainsaw and pry the ivy away. I hate doing it because honestly, cutting into ivy that's got dirt and earth and stuff in all those hairs just blunts out your chainsaw blade in no time at all. But I didn't really have an option here. And once I'd made those two cuts, what I was actually having to do on occasions was to use a crowbar to drag some of that ivy off. Bits of it were loose, but bits of it really weren't. They were hanging on like grim death. And I think when you see that with my hand there for sort of size comparison, you can realise just how chunky this ivy really was. And perhaps even better is the sight of that tree trunk when I've removed a section of ivy in the middle. If you ever want to kill ivy that's climbing a tree, perhaps not as deep as that, but that's the way to do it. Make 2 cuts and remove the ivy from the middle. Because of where this tree is and how awkward the access is, there's no way I could film carefully all the falling of it, because it wasn't safe to have a camera in that space where my escape route might have to be. But I am going to try and talk you through a few of the things I did. So take a look at the telegraph pole, the tree to the right and the diagonal line to the right of that. That diagonal line is actually a plumb line, a chalk line that I'm using to check vertical. And the lay of the land here is quite confusing, and it looks like that tree is vertical, where actually it isn't, it's leaning, as you can see from that plumb line. It's a useful technique. You need to walk right round the tree, check it from all aspects. The other thing I'm doing here, which a professional I'm sure wouldn't need to do, is I'm making sure that the face cut that I put in is completely horizontal. And I'm checking that with a spirit level, because I'm so anxious that I don't want the tree to fall the wrong way. So I'm making very careful. That orange line you can see is completely horizontal. Then I cut in the face cut. That's that wedge you can see that I've cut, and that points the direction that I want the tree to fall. I'll then cut in from the back towards, but not joining with, the face cut. I will leave some solid wood called a hinge that's between the face cut and the back cut. And that solid wood controls the direction of fall, because if you can imagine that it's wide but narrow, it can't fall in the sort of left to right direction as you look at that screen, because that would rip a lot of wood away. But it can fall in the direction of the wedge and the direction of the face cut, and that's where we want it to go. Next job then is to put in the back cut. Bit tricky again on this job, because the saw I'm using here has got an 18-inch bar. Now I'm going in carefully, but it doesn't reach right across the trunk. So I also have to cut from the other side of the trunk, making sure that on neither side does it meet the face cut. We want to leave that hinge wood in the middle between the face and back cut to control the fall. Having finished the back cut, tapping you can hear is me knocking plastic wedges into that back cut. In a very controlled way, they are tipping the tree forward towards the face cut. Eventually the tree gives a shiver, and I can just pop a crowbar into that gap, give it a little tip, and the tree will fall. Listen to the crack of the hinge. Safely down where we wanted it to be. I couldn't show the use of the wedges when I was falling the tree, because the camera and tripod would have blocked my escape route, and that's a big no-no. Always leave yourself room to get out of the way. But I'm using them again here as I tidy up the stump below where that wire was that we looked at earlier. And by tapping them in with the back of the axe there, what I'm doing is holding that cut open as I cut right through the trunk. If I didn't have those wedges in place, what would happen is the trunk would sit down on the bar, jam the chain, and the saw would actually be locked in the middle of the stump. By holding it open with the wedges, I can freely move the saw all the way through the trunk and out the other side. Well, that's down and down safely, not without its tricky areas, not without its difficulties, but tree safely on the ground. I do want to make the point that I will look at some trees and go, no, way beyond my expertise. When we moved in here, there was a dying dead tree growing up between power lines. And I just took one look at it and was like, nope, not touching that. You know, absolutely not. Got a local professional in, brilliant guy called Darren, so hi Greenscape. And he arranged with the power company, had the power turned off, and he carefully dismantled that tree and brought it down in pieces with no damage done. Way beyond what I'm capable of. So, you know, I doff my hat to the professionals, and I think part of, you know, being a farmer, being a homesteader, being a smallholder is know your capabilities and work within them. So on this occasion, I was comfortable doing what I did. It wasn't a massive tree, and it was reasonably straightforward to drop it where I wanted to drop it. To avoid this getting too long with the tree safely on the ground, we're going to stop that video there. And if you've enjoyed it so far, spare us a second and give us a thumbs up down below. We are going to come back with a part 2 and show you how we process that felled tree, what we do with the brush, what we do with the limbs, what we do with the trunk. We're going to show you how we turn all of that into useful stuff around the homestead. And if you'd like to see that, just hit the subscribe button, the bell next to it. You'll hear every time we upload a new video. And if you want to know more, just tell us in the comments. Do you want to know how to sharpen a chainsaw? Do you want to know how to sharpen an axe? Do you want to know what kind of axe is best to use? Do you want to see how to fell a tree just using simple hand tools? Tell us in the comments and we'll make those videos for you. But whatever you do, come back and see us soon. Take care.